Please help us bring up Joan Hoxsey.
I'm the only one that needs this. My dad was a very heavy smoker, probably 2 packs a day. My mom was not a smoker. They were pretty representative of their generation. Men smoked because it was addicting, and women didn't smoke because it wasn't ladylike. That began to change. I think a whole generation sort of had that feeling. But it began to change during the Second World War, when lots of women went into the workforce, or they went into the services, and the practice of smoking among women became a great deal more. So in the late 40s and early 50s, people didn't know it, but the tobacco companies were really interested in what they now found was an untapped market, which was women. And so when I was in grade school and high school, began to see more women smoking in magazine ads, or talking about LSMFT, Lucky Strikes on the radio, and particularly in the movies. Anybody remember Betty Davis? Betty Davis was actually famous for smoking. You know, what an easy job. Just be a good actress and smoke, and you. And she had a very big career. In one of her moments, or one of her movies, there's this wonderful scene. It's Look Homeward Angel, I think. And there's this one beautiful scene where she and Paul Henry, who was a French actor with an accent and the whole thing, and they've decided they're star-crossed lovers and they're not going to be able to be together. And he says to her, well, let's just have one last cigarette. And he puts 2 cigarettes in his mouth. He lights them and he takes 1 cigarette, hands it to Betty Davis. It was the sexiest thing about the sexiest thing for my generation that ever happened. So I came to high school in Salem, Oregon, which is very far away from here, but I think it was probably pretty true across the country that more young women were smoking. My brothers were all considerably older than I, and so they brought their girlfriends and later their wives to our house, and they all smoked. And I know it was kind of hard for my mother to see that, because she really had been taught that it was unladylike. I began to kind of experiment with cigarettes. Experiment is the new term, you know. Experiment with a lot. Not so much in my age. So I'm a senior in high school, and the really you're proud of the in crowd, you know. And I always wanted to be, you know, in the in crowd. I was rather tall for my group, and I was stone skinny. I was Audrey Hepburn before Audrey Hepburn. And it was wrong, because Betty Grable was really or Marilyn Monroe more so was the idol. So for me to be included with that, you know, kind of sexy group was really wonderful. And so we could go off campus from our little Catholic school for lunch, and we'd go around the corner and we'd go to the Trailways bus depot. It's a really stinky place. But it had this waiting room, and they expected you to smoke. And so we'd go around at lunchtime and have our cigarette. And I can remember sitting there thinking, oh, I'm finally in. So come senior skip day, and it's a surprise that I ever smoked, though, really, because I got so sick the first time I tried. So if anybody's here contemplating it, don't do it. You'll get sick. But I overcame that. So our senior skip day, which was a kind of a tradition in my school to go off to the Oregon coast, was coming up, and we were all very excited about it. So there were probably 7 or 8 of us that had decided we would rent a little speedboat and we'd explore one of the inlets from the ocean. And we were cool, you know. So we get to the ocean and we get to the boat, and we didn't know much about exploring, so we were kind of bored. And somebody suggested, they said, why don't we get out on the front of the boat and play movie star, so we can, you know, do these poses and we'll take pictures and you'll all look wonderful in your swimsuits and all of that. So I happened to be the very last one who got out on the front of the boat, and I posed with I didn't have a boot at the time. I posed with my cigarette. I was the last one, and when I came in to the boat again, this really popular girl said to me, you know what, Joan? I said, what? She said, you were the only one who looked like they knew what they were doing. I had been practicing. So, you know what that does to your ego? At 17 and somebody tells you you look cool and you think, well, what made me look cool? And it wasn't the bathing suit. It was a cigarette, I thought. So when I went off to college, I was thrilled, and I went from the same trailways busty. But I got on the bus, and I was really excited because they had ashtrays. Now, I've been hiding ashtrays for a long time. To have one in the open was quite exciting. So I thought, my gosh, I can smoke all the way to Seattle, which is a little over 200 miles. And I did. Oh, I felt so grown up, smoking my cigarette. It wasn't such a unique thing when I got to college, actually. I was kind of pleased, you know, that I kind of just fit in, because I think almost everybody I knew on campus smoked, every girl that I knew. So comes along my sophomore year, and this guy is on campus for the first time. At least I didn't notice him the freshman year, and I kind of looked at everybody. You know, sort of like first smoking, you kind of test him out. So this guy is back on campus from having been there before. He had been in the Marine Corps. And I liked him. I thought, gee, he's kind of cute. And that Marine Corps uniform, I happened to see him in his blues one time. I thought, so we got introduced by a girl who smoked. And I remember an evening, because he was a veteran, we could go out to the Sandpoint Naval Station. Now, you can't imagine for an 18-year-old girl to go out on this military, very exclusive officers club and have dinner. And here's what happened. It just was the clincher in a way. So we go out and we have dinner, and after dinner he pulls out, and I hadn't been smoking in front of him because I didn't know whether he liked girls who smoked. And I hadn't kissed him yet either, because I was afraid. So dinner is over with, and we're served our coffee, and he takes his pack of cigarettes out, and he takes 2 cigarettes out, puts them in his mouth, lights them, and I said, take me! Dave just got a heart attack over that. So I ended up marrying this guy. Oh, and he was such a sweetie. And we had, in the next 10 years, we had 6 children, 6 pregnancies. And I smoked all the time. I smoked through every one of those. I never had a a doctor say anything to me. Until the very last doctor I had. And he said, he thought he would be very kind of logical and he'd get you, you know, about the smoking. And so I was about 2/3 or better through the pregnancy, and he said to me, you know, I did this calculation recently for my patients who smoke, and he said, I figured out that if you took the money that you spent on cigarettes, he said, in a year's time or a little bit more, you could have enough to go to Hawaii. I didn't think he even knew who I was, you know. I said to myself, you think I can go to Hawaii with 6 kids? I'd rather smoke. So I continued to smoke, and I have to say I was really, really addicted to my cigarettes. And I, you know, as the health news began to change and we began to hear about how bad smoking was for you, and I thought, well, I probably really should quit. And I tried. Oh, God, did I try. My daughter reminded me last night that I put the cigarettes in the freezer. I put the cigarettes under the bed. I only would buy 1 pack at a time. When we could get cigarettes at the naval station for like $2 a carton, so that was a big sacrifice. That's also the reason I didn't think the doctor was very, very, very smart. I thought my ultimate attempt to quit smoking would be when I heard this, or read, I think, in a ladies' magazine, this particular method. And what you did was you took your cigarettes, you put them on a piece of notebook paper, and you wrapped them up in the notebook paper, and then you put about 17 rubber bands around it. And that wasn't enough. You took them and put them out in some place where you didn't normally pass. So I put mine in the mailbox. I wore a tread between the kitchen and the mailbox. And so you were to get your cigarettes then and write down while you were smoking at what time, so forth. Didn't work for me. So when we'd been married about 11 years or 12 years, and our oldest daughter was going to be 11, she was 10 in a few months, was sitting on the family room floor one Sunday afternoon, and I noticed the light come in from the window and kind of hit her on her neck here. And I thought, gee, there's something on her neck. There's a little lump on her neck. And I went over and touched it, and sure enough, there was a bump on her neck. And I said to her, when did this start, honey? And she said, well, Grammy noticed it last night. She said, she put Vicks on it. So we put Vicks on everything. So, of course, I took her to the doctor the next day. And the doctor said, well, probably an infection. He said, let me put her on a round of antibiotics. So he did that, and as the weeks went on with the antibiotics, they didn't seem to be doing any good. In fact, if anything, the lump was getting larger, and to the point she was kind of holding her head actually to one side. And he tried a number of different drugs and other kinds of treatments, and nothing seemed to be helping. And so he said, well, you know, the only way we're really going to find out what this is about is if we go in and do some exploration. We have to go in and take a look. He said, my best guess is that it's one of 2 possibilities. It's either a cyst, which means there's just been fluid collecting there for some reason, and he said, I don't think that's serious at all. But he said, the other possibility is very serious. He said, it could be a lymph node, and in fact, it sort of feels like a lymph node. Oh my gosh. So what does a lymph node mean, doctor? And he said, well, it means in all likelihood that she has Hodgkin's disease. So we booked her in for surgery, and my husband and I went to the hospital the morning she was to have the surgery and paced back and forth in front of the surgery ward. And she wasn't in very long, and the anesthesiologist came out, and It happened that my husband was friends with some of the medical people in town, and so the anesthesiologist, say that 5 times, said to him, do you have Joan prepared? And he said, what do you mean? And he said, well, it was a lymph node, it wasn't a cyst. And he said, Hodgkin's disease lymph nodes have a very particular color. They're kind of on the gray side. And he said, if I ever saw one, the one we took out of Geraldine today is exactly that. Oh my God. And about that time, the surgeon walked out, and he also knew Michael, and he said, well, now don't get too panicky. He said, I'm 90% sure that this was a Hodgkin's lymph node. And he said, but you know, we were living in California at the time, and he said, you know, they're doing great things in Berkeley. And he said, in fact, there's another little boy in town, he's about Geraldine's age, and when we get this all straightened out and get the pathology report and everything, I'll introduce you to them, and you can carpool back and forth to Berkeley for treatment. So that's how we left the hospital that day. They were sending the lymph node to the pathology department, and Michael and I went home. I don't think we've ever been more crestfallen in our lives. And they kept Geraldine overnight, and I don't think we said 2 words the whole evening. And we got the babies to bed, and my habit had been for a long time to, once I got the last one down, was to take a cigarette and a Coca-Cola and go run a hot bath and soak in the bathtub for a while. So I did that particular night. I went and ran a hot tub and got into the tub, and I'm smoking my cigarette, and I wish I could tell you exactly what transpired. I think it was a thought, but I don't know that it was a thought. It might actually have been more real than a thought. But it came over me, this idea, Joan, what if this is about you? What if this is about your health? What if this is about you staying on this earth to be mother to your children? Oh my God. And I knew what that meant. That meant I'd have to give up the cigarettes. And I remember, I think I said it out loud. It feels like I said it out loud. I said, if this is not a Hodgkin's node, I will never smoke again. Dear God, please. So we got up the next morning to go early and to go pick Geraldine up from the hospital. What we didn't know was that the pathologist, who was also a friend of my husband's, had seen the lymph node come in the night before. And it was he had about a week's worth of work, but he moved the lymph node up to the front of the line in a sense. So we'd gone off to pick Geraldine up, and we'd left the baby, Jamie, at the neighbor's. So when we got home, Geraldine and her dad went into the house, and I went up to the neighbor's to pick the baby up. And when I got back to the house, we had a kind of a long hallway that went from the front door past the living room and into the family room. And I opened the door, and Michael and Geraldine were literally bouncing off the walls. I mean, they were jumping up and down, and they were hollering at the top of their voice, "It's benign, it's benign." And Geraldine saw me open the door, and she ran down the hallway, and she said to me, "Mommy, what's benign?" And I said, "What does it mean, Mommy, benign? Tell me what it means." And I said, "Honey, it means I'll never have another cigarette." And I never did.
applause for Joan.